My fear, and the reason I wanted to talk about this with you this afternoon, is my fear is that not only that we get a bit sort of apathetic about the kind of language that we hear from people in roles where they have, where they're leaders and they have a huge platform. I have a platform. It's not quite the platform that Donald Trump has, obviously, but I have a big platform that I use every time I open my mouth on the radio as well. Some of you will like what you hear. Some of you won't like what you hear. I hope that even if you don't like what you hear, and even if I don't like what I hear from you in a conversation, we can at least have a decent civilized conversation about issues, and for the most part I think we do. But I've got an example coming up here from last night's Question Time programme. Not so much the programme itself, because I'll play this clip in a second. When it was said live on the programme, there was a question that led to the clip. There were responses to what the audience member said. So in the full context, there was challenge. There was conversation, there was challenge to what this individual said. But then, like many programmes these days, Question Time put the clip out on social media, on Twitter, and presumably I saw it on Twitter, presumably on Facebook as well. And it just stood alone. Listen to this, standing alone. No explanation, no challenge. I'll challenge it in a minute, but just standing alone.
Interesting what you're saying here. 68 million people now live in England, going up, UN estimates. At what stage does the panel and people think this country has had enough? That we should close the borders, completely close the borders, because it's got to the stage now is there's no education, schooling, infrastructure. It's enough. We are sinking. Surely someone's got to see common sense and say enough is enough. You've got people flooding into this country that cannot speak English. I've come from London. In the National Health Service, everything's written in different languages. How much is that costing? How much is it costing for the interpreters? Sorry, madam. How much is it costing for the interpreters? I was in hospital last week. The interpreter never turned up for the people who couldn't speak English. She was paid. They all had to go on, and all the radiologists stood around doing nothing. What sort of country is allowing this? What sort of country is allowing this tourism to come in? You arrive in a plane, you get free service, you can have your babies, you can just carry on having it all for free. Why haven't they got points set up in the hospitals and you pay like you do in every other country you go to? You wouldn't turn up in America and be allowed to go for free.
There's Fiona Bruce in the background there starting to say, let the panel respond. And the panel did respond live on air. It's not quite live, is it, when it's broadcast, but there it was. But the clip out there, that clip from that lady is out there now on Twitter. Now, some people will be able to challenge it. Some people won't wish to challenge it. It will just stroke them and reassure them that actually all their views about Britain sinking and being overwhelmed by migration, and there being no education system to speak of left, there being no services left. Any serious damage to services that we've seen over the last decade is not to do with immigration, it's to do with austerity and cuts to those services. Flooding into this country. Different languages. The abomination. Different languages. A GP surgery daring to put some information in different languages on the walls so that people who speak those languages can understand and get some healthcare. Good God, what's the country coming to? Different languages. Do you know what I mean? It's nonsense. And what she said about health tourism, people just coming willy-nilly and using the NHS, actually qualifying for free NHS care in this country isn't based on nationality or where you are from. It's based on the frequency with which you reside in the UK. If you are ordinarily resident in the UK, you can access free NHS care, and it depends sometimes on the type of treatment that you need. So you can register with a GP when you are here. You can get accident and emergency treatment if you're injured in a sudden accident. Do we want to be a country that leaves tourists to bleed to death on streets when they're injured because they're tourists? I don't think we do we? I don't think that's not Britain. Certainly not the Britain I recognise or wish to recognise. And as for the cost of so-called health tourism, that can include, based on what I've just said, that your access to free healthcare, NHS care, is based on whether you are ordinarily resident in the UK. If I left this country and 15 years later decided I quite liked that old GP I used to see and came back to see him or her because of a problem I had, I wouldn't actually have automatic free access to NHS treatment because I wouldn't be ordinarily resident in the UK. So the woman had almost everything wrong in what she said. It was all based on fear or antipathy of foreigners, what she said. She may be a very nice lady, but she's afraid of foreigners, clearly. And none of it was correct. Nothing she said was correct. That may have been, I didn't see the programme last night, that may have been cleared up in the responses that were given by the panel, but it's certainly not cleared up on Twitter, is it? It's just out there. Xenophobia, it's just out there. And you can I'm reacting to it for the purposes of the programme, and I'm reacting to it because I'm reacting to it. But the reality of so-called health tourism is it's 0.3%. 0.3% of health spending is in situations I've just described there, when foreign people or British expats, can also be health tourists, by the way, come into the UK, and significant amounts of that 0.3% can be recouped back, either from individuals or from the EU. I mean, there's been some change. When was it? 2015, was it? When the NHS surcharge came in, where people are contributing more. So she was wrong. She was wrong in everything she said, except that I can't argue with what she said she saw when she was in a hospital and the radiologists or whatever it was couldn't do their job because the patient didn't turn up and they wasted money paying an interpreter to show up. I can't argue with that because I wasn't there. But the other stuff, I'm afraid she's completely wrong. And if we are lazy and apathetic about responding to comments like that, if we are lazy and apathetic when somebody says immigrants always bring wages down, sometimes an increase in immigration in a particular sector can depress wages, but there's as much evidence to say it increases wages in other sectors, and that depression that can happen in wages is often very short term. So we have to challenge these statements every single time if they have even the whiff of nonsense about them. And pretty much everything that lady said was nonsense, at least not true.